Okay, so let's talk about where we're at the moment in the world. And when we sat down to write about what we would be covering in this month's programme, I sat down in the cafe in John Lewis, of all places, in Oxford Street, and almost had like a complete download of, well, it was partly rage, I think, but I've been, reading and trying to make sense of what's going on in the world at the moment, and felt this huge rush of energy around wanting, first of all, to name the sort of naked power grab that we're seeing going on at the moment in the bigger field, but also then linking it back into what I know to be really helpful, and what we know from the work we've done over the last 10 years to be really helpful and restorative as a way of staying resilient in testing times. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. So both a chance to collectively perhaps look at, name, give space to some of the feelings we might be having at the moment, and then also to be able to learn some really practical, grounded tools that you can take away and apply straight away in your lives and use as a really sort of valuable practice. So I'm going to share with you an image that I came across as I was looking at LinkedIn, and this jumped out at me. And this is a saying by Antonio Gramsci, who is an Italian, I think a communist maybe, around the time of Mussolini, but it still seems really very relevant, that the old world is dying. And so we've got this dying off of the old, but it's having a really virulent go at grabbing the levers of power. And a new world struggles to be born. So the rising line, now is the time of monsters. And surely we're seeing lots of monsters at the moment. And it can feel quite scary or dispiriting or rage making if you spend too much time looking at the news. And the temptation to want to perhaps switch off completely, I know, can be quite strong. And yet I think we're playing into the hands of the monsters if we allow ourselves to be persuaded to do that. And I've been reading the Guardian journalist Carol Cadwallader, who's been very involved with, investigating Cambridge Analytica and the whole movement towards the misuse of social media. And she coined this term, the broligarchy, where you have the tech bros and the millionaires and the oligarchs and government all converging now and really grabbing the levers of power. So as I say, it's easy to feel perhaps a bit helpless in the face of that. And it would be interesting to hear, maybe if you just put in the chat box, perhaps some of the feelings you've been having around this time, and what's been coming up for you. Be interesting to hear, because the very name, the very act of noticing what we're feeling and naming it has power in itself, and is a way of regulating our nervous system before we move into action about how we might respond. Just naming it. So yeah, so helplessness, numb to rage and back again. Yes, tension of duality, alarmed, disbelief and sadness, mix of shock, rage and fierce hope. I like that. Yeah, fear and disbelief, polarization. And it can be hard to find the places to share these feelings and talk about it. It can feel so overwhelming. And we're being so encouraged to just retreat into our own little bubbles. Anger. Yeah, yeah. So part of what we're doing here, so I'm showing you a picture of the mycelium, the forest floor. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this idea, but recent progressions in science, we're understanding that underneath the forest floor, there are all these strands of fungus, mycelium, that connect the trees up with each other. So under the forest, these, and not only do they connect, but they actually communicate with each other. It's like the whole plant internet that exists beneath the surface. And what scientists, and particularly people who mycologists who specialize in fungi, say that actually the trees, the mycelium, the trees are communicating with each other. They're sharing nutrients, they're sharing information. There's a whole world going under there, underneath there. And Hetty and I's consistent experience of bringing groups of women together over the last 10 years is that we actually start to create those webs underneath the surface when we gather. So what might seem like a very small act in the face of some of what we're seeing in the world actually is an important act of resistance and creating community. So intentionally coming together is really powerful. So that's some of the facing the challenges that we're dealing with. Let's have a look now at the tool, the particular tool that we want to share with you, the Celtic Calendar. So there's some more pictures. So here is the model of the Celtic Calendar, and this is something I came across probably maybe about 15 years ago. I got invited to a weekend retreat in a woodland in Wiltshire to celebrate Beltane, the spring festival. And I spent about another 4 years going to this woodland and experiencing all these different points of the compass. And what I came to realize was that if I lived my life in rhythm and adopted a rhythm that was there all around me, but I tended not to notice when I lived my everyday life dictated by screens and living in a city, that I actually felt much more grounded, more secure, and it gave, yes, a sense of security, a sense of a reference point in my life that I that was very reassuring and grounding, and it feels to me like quite a powerful antidote to what we see in the with the monsters, which is very much an idea of. So I'll explain what it is for a moment. So this was developed by the Celts who lived in the British Isles and across Northern Europe from about 3000 BC. So it's been around for about 5000 years. And you have places like Newgrange in Ireland, which was built to line up with the winter solstice, and that's about 5000 years old. So this has been understood for a very long time. And the structure of it is to look, first of all, at the longest day and the shortest day. So that's the summer solstice is the longest day of the year. The winter solstice is the shortest day of the year. And then you have the equinoxes, the spring and the autumn, which represent those halfway points when the day and the night, for 3 days, the day and the night are of equal length. And then we tip either into the darker half of the year, if we're moving into autumn and winter, or tipping into the lighter half of the year, if we're in the spring equinox. So that creates like a sort of skeleton, a structure. And these points were really noticed and paid attention to by those ancient peoples, and they found them really valuable and important, and a way of orienting life. And obviously that was very much around growing food and understanding how to best work with the seasons and have the best harvest. But we can also use it as a way of guiding ourselves in modern life as well. So to this, the Celts added 4 additional festivals, which they called the quarter festivals, which were the points roughly between the solstices and the equinoxes. So the Celts started actually with what they pronounce as Samhain, spelt Samhain, which we think of as Halloween, which is down in the bottom right corner. So they saw the year as actually starting with going into the underworld, going into the darkness, which again is a very counterintuitive idea from our modern life, which is all about going up and towards the light and towards productivity and outwardness and manifestation. And the idea that you start with, and very much the hero's journey about the soul hero who vanquishes the obstacles and triumphs. Whereas the heroine's journey is very much about going into the underworld. It's about dissolution. So it starts with going into the underworld. Then you have the darkest quarter of the year, the bottom 2 chunks of this pie. So we've got the composting and the dreaming phases. And now we've just come past Imbolc, which is those first signs of spring. And we're seeing that certainly in the UK. We're starting to see some sunnier days, some longer days, some spring light. And we're in the forming phase, and then we'll come up to the spring equinox towards the end of March. And that's when we really turn into the sort of more visible half of the year. And then we go to Beltane, which is the sort of high spring, lots of energy, all about fertility, the summer solstice, and then round to the harvest of August, the autumn equinox again, the gathering in of the harvest, the second harvest, and then finally the third harvest of the nuts and seeds at Samhain. So you can see this as a template for any sort of creative project. It starts with an idea, a dream, you form it, you nurture it yourself, you start to put forward some buds, flowers, it ripens, you harvest the fruits, you let go of whatever you need to release, you compost, and then you start again. And as women, we know this in our bodies. We have it in terms of our menstrual cycles. If we still have a menstrual cycle, we have that rhythm encoded in our bodies. And when we reach postmenopause, we can still honor that monthly cycle by paying attention to the phases of the moon. It's another way of doing it. So what's happened in our culture is that we have a culture that honors the top half of this cycle, the budding, the flowering, the ripening, the harvesting. And, and business is all about spring and summer. It's all about growth and results and what's visible and doing rather than being. And these things are all important, but if they're not balanced out by the releasing, the composting, the dreaming, the apparent non-doing, the resting, then we get horribly out of kilter, which feels to me is what's been going on in our society. So we have, mostly men in charge who are doing these things who are completely disconnected from the bottom half of this cycle. So whilst everybody, men and women, benefit from this, I think women have a particular embodied understanding of these cycles. And I think what we've experienced over the last 10 years is there's a real power in women coming together to work with these cycles in a conscious way and to put them foreground rather than letting them go background and them just being part of the backdrop of our lives.
That's a wonderful segue, I think, Liz, into let's remind us of the centering.
Yes. So
let's do that because we've got a little exercise. We've got we want to pursue the Celtic calendar, but just to frame it within the body. Marion, you put it so beautifully, we shrink. When this is part, I should have said this right at the introduction, this session today is part of our theme. We're doing a series on power, and we've focused before on the power of connecting with our ancestors, the power of community and friends and role models. And today we're broadening it out and saying the power of community that is brought together by sharing a common frame, a different story. And it begins with the body. Those of you who, many of you here have worked with us before, and you know that we always focus on this idea of centering. It's not a meditation, and it's not a grounding. You don't have to stay still. You can move with this. It is about bringing our attentiveness back to where it all begins, which is the body. So let's just do it, and then I'll say a little bit about it. You can sit, you can stand, you can move, you can dance, you can do whatever you like. It begins with paying attention to feeling your feet connected with the earth. And this may just be metaphorical. Many of us, you might be high up or in a building, but feeling that sense of connection. As I say, it's not about grounding, it's connection. And then as you breathe in, imagine the breath traveling up your spine again. If you wish, you can close your eyes, but again, there's no imperative to do that. And you hold it briefly at the top. And as you release, you feel the release of the breath down the front of the body, perhaps like a flow of water, a waterfall, and you feel that expansion. Deliberately feel the expansion, allowing your shoulders to slip down your back, bringing to mind something or someone or a place that makes you smile, that brings that sense of pleasure, joy, that smile, and you'll feel the impact on your jaw. And again, feeling that sense of expanding out into the environment from your core, from the breath. Do a couple of those in your own time. Up your spine, and as you breathe up your spine, connect with your strength. The spine is the most wonderfully strong, flexible, responsive piece of human engineering ever invented. You connect with your dignity and your integrity as you connect with your spine. And as you release and breathe out, bring the words compassion, connection, reaching out, whatever the words are that feel right for you, generosity, graciousness, contribution. It's a reaching out into the world, which can feel counterintuitive. I read what Elizabeth put in the chat about when we're faced with blatant, raw, power grabby, dominator power, we can feel we want to shrink and hide. And what I'm asking you to do now is to expand and glow, to become that light of moving out. So that's a tiny taste. If you'd like to come back to the present, I hope that even those few seconds has given you some sort of response. And again, you can unmute and shout out or put into the chat, what does that do for you when we call this a centering, and it comes from the work of Wendy Palmer. We use some of her work in our programs. But this idea of not allowing yourself to be knocked off balance. One of the things that happens when life happens is that we get knocked off balance all the time. Everybody does. No one is centered all the time. The idea is how soon and how elegantly, if you like, can you come back to balance? Can you recenter? And it comes from the work of Aikido, which is a non-violent martial art, this idea that we can find balance in movement. We can stay centered even in the eye of the storm, even in the face of our fears and the dangers around us, or the aggressions we might meet, or the stresses that we're grappling with. And when we're centered, we move from what's called the reactive self, which can feel like, life comes at us and we're just always reacting like that. Yeah. And when we're in our reactive self, our head wants control. Can I understand this? I've got to make sense of this. What's going on? So that I can re-establish a sense of I'm in control here. Our heart, these are the three centers of the body. Our heart wants approval. We seek validation from those around us. It's important. It's really good. We need validation. We need approval. But it can become over-dominating in the way we live our lives, that we can feel small unless those in power say, you're okay, you're good. And when we become dependent on that, we lose our power. We're giving away our power again. And our gut, which is the third key center, often called the hara or the core, that seeks safety. And so, as Elizabeth wrote in the chat, we shrink and we hide because we want to be safe. And this is way beyond anything that we could figure out. It's not about being clever or smart about this. We are human creatures, and these are our normal, healthy reactions to keep us safe. So counterintuitively, when we work with that centering breath, we're saying, can we keep our mind open and curious and perceptive? What am I noticing? Ah, that's interesting. This is going on. And this enables us to stay attentive to what's going on around us and attentive to those around us who might need a kind word or a conversation or a hand on the shoulder or an engagement, those we work with and our colleagues. Our heart can enable compassion when we're centered. So it's counterintuitively we reach out towards the other, towards the world with compassion. And our gut and core, and here's the real payoff, develops confidence. It develops confidence. Because when we're hiding, we're constantly shrinking and clamping down and making ourselves small. When we expand, counterintuitively, but I can tell you it's true because I've got over 10 years now experience working with clients in this way. Confidence is the payoff. You develop more confidence the more you stand tall. So you could say that when we connect with our spine, we're saying, what do I stand for? Who am I in the world? What matters to me? We reconnect with our values and our dignity and our integrity. That's the up-down energy, connecting with the ground and with the sky and that flow. And when we connect with sideways, when we do that sense of expanding, it enables our capacity to connect, to reach out to people. So it's a win-win, it's a virtuous circle. It enables us to inspire, to connect. And it's what's called, in the trade, presence. So forget charisma, all those bells and whistles and loud noises and sparklers. But when you have real presence, people know it. And it's that will enable you to have influence, to hold on to your power and to share that inner power with other people, connecting with others towards fulfilling the values, contributing to the values that you stand for. And this is what lies at the heart of our programs that we teach. So that's just a taster. So it begins, you and yourself, with yourself, are a community. I am a community. So it begins with that connectivity within us that enables us to connect outwards. So let's come back to the Celtic calendar now and this idea of the seasons. Liz.
Yes. So what we'd like to do now is just take you through a short exercise as a way of really grounding this, because we've gone from the sort of massive macro to how do we, down to our bodies, and how do we land this idea in our lives. So coming back to this map, and as Emma said, if you're in the southern hemisphere, the dates get flipped. Yes, so they are opposite. And yet, as long as you're somewhere that's seasonal, that broadly yes, wherever you are in the world, there will be a solstice and an equinox, but obviously the shape of it is different nearer to the equator. But certainly in the southern hemisphere, you can experience this as well. So coming back to this and looking at, let's locate ourselves now where we are. So we are in that bottom left-hand corner, the forming phase between Imbolc and the spring equinox. And a lot of people really struggle with this time of year. January, February can find it the hardest months to get through. And certainly before I really worked with this practice, I just wanted to get through those 2 months. It's just like, wake me up on the 1st of March, please, after Christmas. And I've come to really appreciate this time of year much more. So I'd invite you to take a few moments, if you have a pen and paper near you for some journaling or somewhere where you can make some notes, and give yourself, or take just 3 minutes or so, just to jot down anything about what are the pleasures, the consolations, the small pleasures perhaps of this time of year, and particularly what you're noticing in nature. Give yourself some time to do that. It may be noticing the snowdrops, or like yesterday we had a lovely sort of spring sunshine day here on the south coast, and it just was really delightful. And I went and sat in a cafe and looked at the park, and yeah, so whatever it is, or maybe just that feeling of feeling slightly more sociable at the beginning of February than you did at the beginning of January. So whatever it is for you.
Some interesting comments in the chat just while you've been speaking, Liz. I've been reflecting, Lisa, on what you were saying about the flattening out of the seasons and the incredibly high temperatures. And then Emma Horton put into the chat, what about Australia? When you flip, and Emma Pearson, you were talking about wintering can be much longer than an actual winter. And all of these things, I think, as we start to pay attention, not just to this, when we start to pay attention to the large cycles, we offer the Celtic calendar not because it's the only truth, but because it's a wonderful way to say we can tell different stories, and that there may be, for example, circadian rhythms during the day, where you can really manage your energy in a very delicate and loving way, to stay connected with your energy rather than forcing it into that industrial model of 9 to 5, clock in, clock out. There are ways that we can look at the longer cycles, for example, of grief and birth, the periods in our lives, those long periods in our lives of perhaps developing our youth, our middle years. And then, Liz and I have talked a lot about the later years when energy starts to be released for different projects, for different priorities. And so this is also a nudge, if you like, or an offering to encourage all of us to pay attention to the rhythms, your own rhythms, the rhythms around you, the rhythms that make sense to you of your lives, and to reach out into community. I've noticed more and more people doing this, actually chatting to strangers almost, cinemas and things, that need that we need to just reconnect and know that we're not alone in the separation that fear brings about, the separateness and the shrinking. So this thing of expanding. And there's some lovely comments in the chat. I encourage you. I am mindful of time. We've got a couple of minutes, and I just want to really say thank you so much to all of you who've come. We will continue this series of free webinars around the theme of power. It's almost like taking the word power back and saying we can reconfigure it differently. We can tell different stories with it. So join us again, watch this space. Anima, I said I would say a word about. It's an online, some of you here have joined us previously for Anima, and it's an online monthly gathering, really. We gather on the last Thursday of every month to share ideas, to greenhouse our projects and our ideas, to face our challenges together and to derive not just support but wisdom from not just the brilliant individuals who turn up, but the collective wisdom, the wisdom that we grow together in those spaces. We've got that the next round, as it were, this year's round starts on Thursday, the 27th of February, and we've just got a couple of spots left if anybody was interested. And then our next Athena, which is this intensive, which we run at a beautiful venue right opposite St. Paul's Cathedral. It's very resonant and rather wonderful. And the next one's going to be on the 7th to 8th of April, if anyone's interested. But you can find all of this on our website and more. And you can find more about the Celtic Calendar. There's a handout on the website in the resources section. And I think Mary might have put a link in the chat. So,
Mary will send a follow-up email, and that will have details of all the programs. And our next date for your diary, we're running our next session on the 17th of March, St. Patrick's Day, for those of you of an Irish extraction, at 4 o'clock. We've had a number of requests for people from California who'd like to join us. So we're going to experiment with running it at 4 o'clock.
And a nicer time for you as well, Lisa, I think. And our theme at the moment will be around sacred anger. So what do we do with our anger and our rage? Do we turn it into despair inwards, or do we find channels? So join us again in March. We'd love to see you. And let's have a tiny stretch. We've got 1 minute. Put your hands together like this, as if you want to pull them apart, turn them upwards, right to the top. Take a deep breath in, turn to the right, blow it out, come back to the middle, take another breath in, turn to the left, blow it out, and then stretch your arms and bring them down, and you should feel a wonderful tingling for your day, your evenings, wherever you are. Go well, take care of yourselves, and follow your peace.
Thanks so much for joining us.